off, everyone but the panelists. It assists with, believe it or not, the technology. Hopefully things will run a bit smoother if we just have the panelists with their voice and video. Thank you. Bob, I'd say get started.
Good morning, everyone, and on behalf of the Board of Governors of the Manchester Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to thank all of you for attending this morning. Our business world has certainly been turned a bit upside down, and while our crystal ball may be a bit fuzzy as we look into the future, the Chamber of Commerce, as the premier business organization in our town, has been here for our members. The Chamber has served as the credible outlet for resources available to our local business owners during this past 2 months. April and her staff have been busy gathering and disseminating an ever-changing and evolving information pipeline to our memberships almost daily. The Chamber has intensified your voice on behalf of our members at the legislative level. Recently, we have created a resource guide showcasing our restaurants who have taken a large hit during this crisis. We've also created a daily dose email designed to promote some of our struggling businesses. These are just a few of the many things we have been doing lately. A couple of weeks ago, we put together a legislative Zoom Q&A, also with Abby Jewett from AT&T sponsoring. And we did that to have people understand what their legislators were thinking about things as we were deep in the middle of this crisis. We've now come full circle in coordinating this event, and we want to help our members understand how they can open their businesses while keeping themselves, their families, their valued employees, and their customers safe, and get back to doing business and providing their service to our community. I want to thank Abby Jewett of AT&T for sponsoring this event and all of our panelists for contributing. Abby will be introducing them in a few moments. I want to turn this over to April DeFalco, and she will explain the resource document the Chamber has created for our members and then outline today's event. Under some trying circumstances, just like your businesses, the Chamber staff has been working hard to keep you informed, and going forward, we are here to help the business community understand how we can safely conduct business. I want to put my plug in for the Chamber. If you are a Chamber member and you're on this call, we really appreciate your support during these times. And if you're on this call and not a member, this is an example of what we at the Chamber can offer you. Please consider joining. And now, April, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. See, that's why he's chair. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank AT&T and Abby this morning for sponsoring the COVID series of Zoom conferences. It's definitely been a tough time, I know, for everyone, but having support like AT&T really helps us to get the word out that our members need to get through. So I also want to thank the impressive guest panel we have with us here today. These panelists are leaders in their industries, and they're going to offer essential information you're going to need to reopen safely. You're not only going to have the opportunity to ask questions regarding the reopening of Connecticut, but you're also going to receive a printed guide, including material that we gather in this conference today. So it's going to be your go-to guide during your reopening process. It's going to include everything from ensuring that your workplace is ready for employees to return, how to manage COVID-related risks after reopening, direct links to important websites, emails, industry guidelines, free and unique marketing available to you during this time from the Chamber and our other collaborative partners, and so much more. So I don't want to take up too much time because I know you probably all have questions, and I think we have nearly 100 people today. So let's just go over quickly the process for the Q&A before I introduce Abby. Guests who wish to ask a question, you're going to be asking it through chat. So for anyone who's not used the chat feature, it's down on your toolbar at the bottom towards the center. You'll click on that. You'll have a dialogue box. You just type in your question, send it out, let it go publicly. And Emma Peterson from my office is working on disseminating these questions to make sure that there's no duplicates. And she's going to get those questions over to our moderator, and our moderator is going to read the questions. So you all can stay on mute, and we can ensure that we have everyone's attention and no background feed. So I guess we ask that you try to keep your questions clear and concise also. So I'll now turn the event over to our sponsor, AT&T, who's been a longtime supporter of our events. We truly appreciate her being our first virtual sponsor during COVID. So everyone, I turn it over to Abby Jewett, the Regional Vice President, AT&T, Connecticut External and Legislative Affairs. Abby?
Thank you, April. And despite the fact that my name at the bottom says Steve Jewett, I am Abby Jewett. And as always, it's a pleasure to do work with the Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce. I was formerly a board member of the Chamber and have always been incredibly impressed with the terrific work that they do for the businesses, not only just in Manchester, but really all over the state. They do a fantastic job. And I'm not going to take up any time introducing myself. I'm sure many of you were on the call we did a couple weeks ago with the legislative Q&A. So I'm going to just jump right in, if that's okay with everybody. And Michelle, why don't you start off and introduce yourself? You're on mute, Michelle.
Thank you. My name is Shelley Koehler. Biological name is Michelle. That's why it shows up there. I am a small business advisor with the SBA, SBDC. And for those of you who don't know what the SBDC is we are a national program with three major stakeholders. Our first major stakeholder is the SBA. Our second one is state of Connecticut, and the third is the University of Connecticut. So with those three stakeholders, we are a program, Small Business Development Center, acronym SBDC. We are charged with helping small businesses. We help them assess, guide, navigate resources within the community. I have worked very closely with the town of Manchester, which is part of my region, and as well the chamber during this time to really help small businesses navigate through the SBA, what to do, how to do it, and connection. So during this time, I'm an integral piece to help people find resources. And even on a regular basis, I have people who want to start businesses now. So I'm helping on both ends. But that is what I do. From our expertise run deep, from financing, helping find funds, to as well helping businesses navigate that process. Help find resources for marketing. Really the assessment piece is going to come into play here with back after COVID.
Terrific. Thank you, Shelley. And next, Tim, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Abby. My name is Tim Phelan. I'm the president of the Connecticut Retail Merchants Association. We're a statewide trade association that represents retailers throughout Connecticut at the state capitol and in the marketplace. Our membership includes some of the world's largest retailers and many of the state's Main Street merchants. Abby, also, I'm lucky as you are, April. Abby is the chairman of our board of directors as well and does a terrific job and is a great leader and advocate for our industry. So we're really pleased to work with her, and when she gave me the chance to come on today, I jumped at it. So our association has been working with many of our members and trying to make sure that the guidelines that have been developed for reopening are in phase one are attainable for many of our smaller members. And so I've also been fortunate enough to be named to the Business Advisory Council of the Reopen Advisory Board. So I'm happy today to try to answer any questions anybody might have on any of the details around the guidelines. I will only say that we have been advocating that the retailers, both large and small, are ready to reopen because we're confident that you are, but there is no mandatory reopen on the day that May 20th comes. If you're not ready to reopen, you don't have to reopen, but we're confident that the time is now right for you and that you're prepared for it. And we're happy today to answer any questions you might have around any of those details.
Thanks, Tim. Gary?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gary Anderson. I'm the Director of Planning and Economic Development for the town of Manchester, and thanks for having me today. I've been working very closely with the Chamber and with Shelley from SBDC and other partners over the last couple of months now to try to help businesses navigate the system here and this new future that we're facing together, unfortunately. So obviously Manchester is a hub of economic activity for the greater Hartford region. We have a robust local economy here, all different types of businesses. I'm sure many of those are on the line right now. So one of our main priorities has been to communicate the resources that are available. We've done that through the town website, and we also have an economic development page that lists COVID resources for businesses. Obviously, part of the challenge there is these things change, daily and sometimes hourly, as you know. So that's really been a challenge to get a handle on that and try to get the correct information out there, disseminated quickly and efficiently. Over the last week or two, we've been scrambling to try to accommodate the governor's executive order on restaurants opening for outdoor dining. So we can get into that. I'm sure there'll be questions about that. But that has been sort of the immediate fire drill here. Our goal is to try to accommodate and be as flexible as possible for businesses that are looking to open during this time and in the next phase, whatever that may be. So, after the session, I'm certainly available to Manchester businesses as well. Feel free to reach out to me and look forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Sandy?
Thank you for having me today. I'm Sandy Pierog, the first selectman of the town of Bolton. And Bolton has also been working, as Gary said, very closely with the Small Business Administration and other support groups for local businesses. And in addition to being Bolton's first selectman, I'm also a practicing CPA. So if you have any questions about doing business within the town of Bolton, I'd be happy to answer those. And I'd also be happy to serve as a backup for any accounting type questions.
Terrific, thank you. Ron?
Hi, I'm Ron Lumpkin, Beacon Cleaning. We've been certified in COVID-19 best practices for cleaning and disinfection. What we can do is help you pass cleaning certification to reopen and design and help you design a program to stay open once you gain your certification, not to lose it. And they answer any questions along that line.
Terrific, thank you so much. Mike?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Bob, April, and the Chamber for giving me a reason today to shave and not wear pajama pants to work. My 21-year-old son, who just graduated from UConn remotely on Saturday, saw me putting on a sport coat and said, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" So it is a whole new world for us. I'd like to echo Bob's sentiment about Chamber membership. In my opinion, there's no better time to be a Chamber member because I think the next chapters in this story are going to be written by small business leaders, chambers of commerce, and local leaders. My own practice, which is predominantly litigation, I head up the litigation practice at Kahan, Kerensky, and Capossela, includes representing employers in claims, planning, and strategy dealing with their workforces. And the inquiries that have been made of me since this pandemic began have sort of tracked the national response to all of this. At inception, everyone was concerned about health and safety. You know, sort of how do I care and feed for myself and keep myself safe? Now we're just starting to see a progression towards a future path and concerns about how we transact business successfully in the future. I've participated in a number of webinars and conversations recently about the state of our court system. So if people do have questions this morning about where things stand or where things are likely to go in the foreseeable future, I'd be happy to address those. It is daunting what's being presented to us as litigators in terms of future prospects for having matters heard in court. And it's certainly going to affect the way we conduct ourselves as lawyers and communicate and advise our clients.
Thanks so much, Mike. Scott?
Good morning, everybody. Abby, April, and Bob, thank you guys so much for having me. My name is Scott Dolch. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Restaurant Association, representing 8,500 restaurants across our state, 160,000 employees. As everyone knows, I know Gary mentioned before, trying to get our restaurants back on their feet. We were, hit the hardest. We're the first asked to close, and it's just been my job is to be that voice and represent our industry across our state, but also on a national level. I work with the National Restaurant Association on a daily basis. So what's going on down in federal, as I heard Shelley talk a little bit about the SBA loans and PPP and EIDL and all the other fun conversations trying to have with my members and non-members about how it's going to work for a restaurant. And obviously also working extremely hard up at the Capitol right now and talking to the governor and the governor's administration throughout all of these phases. Obviously, Wednesday, we will open outdoor dining, what that means for our restaurants here on the call and beyond. And obviously, we are trying to work diligently to look at an indoor option for our restaurants, because we understand the outdoor option is not feasible as a whole, but also there's a lot of restaurants that don't have patios. I know Gary's working to try to help some of those restaurants do that, but even the cost nature that might come with that might not be worth the risk initially. So just working through all those plans, working with the governor's office. I appreciate having the chance to be on today to kind of give any kind of feedback from a restaurant standpoint of what we're dealing with and what we see on the horizon. So thank you guys so much for allowing me to be on.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so I'm going to start off. We have a few questions in the queue, and I'm going to direct them towards the person I think would answer them best, but please, if I've gotten it wrong, just say that's not my area of expertise, and someone else can jump in. But I think the first question is appropriately for Shelley. Small businesses are wondering what the process is to obtain PPE. They found it to be difficult to find commercially and expensive to buy locally. Is there advice that you can give to our attendees here today?
So there are several avenues that we have found that have offered PPE either at cost. Some are giving businesses, essential businesses out of the gate, free PPE. There are limited quantities, and there are some like parameters. And I'll just do a shout out here. And again, these limited quantities, I don't know if they're still available. As I understand it, CBIA was giving out 2 masks per employee for essential workers with, I think, 20 employees or less. Constep was as well offering PPE. There are several other links that I have that I can absolutely make available to this the panel, and as well the chamber, to get it out to everybody on this call. But I think what's coming down the line is really the guidelines and requirements that are going to be made of each small business, which then comes with an expense. The PPE on just the mask side and the gloves and the sanitizer is, we can obtain those, right? And I think as a community, we are willing to share and make sure everybody has enough. And as well, I know the town is also in discussion with making sure, finding out how they can help. But, you know, some are going to need a little bit more, like the shields for cashiers and whatnot. I know of, and I know there are more out there, I know of 2 or 3 organizations that have pivoted to make shields. There's a company out of Shelton, and then there's Advanced, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I will get that to you.
Allied Printing, sorry.
And then Allied Printing. So those, I think those components are going to be really critical, but you know, we can look at that PPE, and then where my conversation kind of comes in is there's a cost to that. And, you know, while very generous of companies to offer it as cost, and they need to, it still might be, you know, $1,000, $2,000 and then ongoing. So part of that is really looking at that expense and making sure that it's covered from somewhere. So I can get those resources to them or to the chamber, and they can disperse it.
That's great. Thank you so much.
That information will be in the guide, listed in the guide.
Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you, April.
Abby, can I just chime in real quick from our standpoint? Because obviously restaurants with masks and gloves, you know, there's definitely going to be specific restrictions, which we are working through. But please, I can send April and Bob, I can send you guys some of our sourcing links, obviously in our industry, you know, and even to some of the retail, having a mask on for a long period of time, back of house, line cooks, things like that. It's always been kind of a concern of ours. We've sourced a couple masks. Obviously there are costs that are associated with this, but you know, where it's not just around your ears, you know, you can have them behind your head and tie back kind of like nurses. We've got, you know, knowing that it's a long period of time, there's like new 3D contours. So the cloth doesn't touch your mouth or your nose. So you actually can keep it on for a longer period of time. And then we also have sourced a company that does all of that, but also can brand it. So going away, if you're thinking this is kind of a long-term thought for any small business, whether you're a restaurant or not, I feel like the paper surgical mask doesn't really welcome, you know, the side, but having more of a uniform look and a brand that's comfortable for your employees. So the mask piece is one. Obviously, we're sourcing gloves. I know the governor has the PPE. I think someone asked that question below. We are trying to ask, and I'm happy to share it with the Manchester Chamber as we get answers about the 100,000 infrared thermometers. Of where those are going to go, and are they going to go to small businesses? We've requested them. Obviously, it's not going to be a mandate that you need to check temperatures, but having them is just another step in best practices. But obviously, the cost. I know they're like $150 to $190, and they're not even in stock right now. So we are trying to do everything we can from an industry and association standpoint to help. But I would speak the same. I know Tim's looking at that as well. But all these small businesses that are trying to get open, we want to be that resource. And then back also to Shelley's point. We have an ask out there on a federal level, which is not just a restaurant ask, but it's a small business ask in this next phase of a bill that we hope can pass in stimulus on a credit, you know, based process for people that are spending money on PPE, that they can get a credit back for that. So that could be masks, that could be plexiglass, that could be gloves, it could be anything that, you know, sanitation to all the opportunities that are out there that you're going to have to expend, you know, dollars that you might not have. But we also are, you know, we know it's not giving right now, but we are trying to make some pushes on a federal level to say, hey, I spent $8,000 over the last 2 months and I can show you my receipts. I can show you these things, but hoping to get a credit back to help your business. And that's not just a restaurant ask. So I wanted to make sure people are aware that that's also a conversation down in DC that's going on. I hope that does get passed to help you guys, but also with what's going on in the state. the stuff that they brought in, what that could mean for small businesses, especially on the thermometer side. But the masks, it seems like you can get some paper masks, things like that, but we can help you guys source some things that might be more beneficial to your employees.
Thank you,
Can I
Scott.
just add one thing to that? In addition to masks that as Scott's talking about, the guidelines for reopening for retail require specific signage, certain signs and social distancing requirements you're going to have inside your stores. We've been working on that with a couple of companies to come up with custom signs that you can use throughout your stores. So we're almost ready to roll that out. Hopefully by the end of today or tomorrow, we'll have that ready to offer to members. I like Scott's idea of getting a credit on a federal level. I'd be happy to work on that. I think that's a great idea because these are unanticipated costs that businesses are going to have to endure to comply to be reopened. But in any event, we're going to have some of that to offer our smaller independent members as well.
Terrific. Thank you, Tim. The next question is regarding the payroll protection plan. And it's a two-part question. It says, if an employee retires within the 8-week period of the loan, will this cause a reduction in the forgiveness? And then secondarily, if employees are asked to come back at full pay but deny, so saying, I don't want to come back, will this cause a reduction in forgiveness? In both cases, the head count and actual wages paid will be down. If the forgiveness is not reduced, then it potentially allows a windfall to the employer. Anyone want to?
A little bit.
That's not my area of expertise.
About the employee who chooses not to come back to work. I think the SBA a week and a half or two ago passed a guideline that says that position is factored into the calculation for forgiveness purposes. So if somebody chooses not to come back, it doesn't hurt you in terms of forgiveness.
Yeah, and Mike's actually right. I think it's like question number 40 of the FAQ of PPP. How many FAQs and interim final rules is always funny. It's final, but there's a new rule every day. But I think making sure all the businesses, and I tell this to my restaurateurs every day, because obviously our industry is one that's making it very difficult for people to come back with what the stimulus package is out there on the unemployment benefit opportunity. But making sure everything is in writing to protect them on this PPP FTE. So, you need to submit the job and need to have them actually decline the job in writing and keeping that on file. Not just saying, oh, well, I offered it and they said they're not coming back. Like that's not going to fly. You're going to need to, and obviously we can help assist with that, but I know Shelley knows that, but PPP is obviously so much fun. We can talk more about, but I know that with the FAQ, and obviously we are trying, so you guys know from restaurateurs and even the retails that aren't going to be able to open, we are doing everything we can on a federal level. You saw Steve Mnuchin last week through the help of the National Restaurant Association made a comment that he sees technical fixes to this program. They haven't come out yet, or guidelines, but we are hopeful that there will be not only for restaurants, but for small businesses that have to delay, and especially in Connecticut, when we can open, when your 8-week window starts, everything else that's out there. But to answer those specific questions, I mean, they're continuing to come through, but you are protected on the second one. The first one, I don't know, Shelley, if you can take on the retirement piece. I don't know if you know.
I don't have anything on the retirement piece. Now, what
Question
I do
40
know,
doesn't address it.
I'm sorry?
The response to question 40 doesn't address it. I was just checking that as Scott was speaking.
No, but there's still a number prior to, if they were employed on February 15th, I think that they're still included as an employee. They can retire, but that particular position, again, would need to be part of the June 30th total. It doesn't have to be the same person, but my understanding is it has to be that total. Now, talking about the timeline, we know that that's kind of part of the discussion that's going on, but looking at just the ebb and flow of employees, right? They've been laid off or furloughed, they're on unemployment, and now they've been given this extra $600 a week. where some employers can't touch that on their regular salary. I have been experiencing some of my clients where their employees, they're ready to open or they have been given the go, you can open XYZ days or certain times, and the employees are not coming back because they're like, why should I? I'm getting more money on unemployment. And that is presenting a huge problem right now with my clients. And what I want to say to that is, and, you know, from a legal standpoint, you know, someone else can tap into that, but there is, and I believe it's in the SBA guidelines, that if in fact someone refuses, one, you do need to get it in writing. And two, there is a particular place where an employer can report this. Because the whole idea of the unemployment and the extra was not to take until they're not giving anymore. It was until you're called back. And I know those were specific words. When your employer calls you back, you need to go back, unless for extenuating circumstances, and that's a whole different conversation. But if they call you back and you don't come, there is, you know, obviously certain guidelines that the employer needs to get it in writing. I offered, they refused. And then, you know, whether they want to report it or not, but it is something that they will have to think through. But there is a place where employers can report saying that, you know, they didn't come back, and what they're doing is they're just waiting out their time until July 25th, until there's, you know, no more $600 extra week. So
I do think, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Clear that that is a disqualifying event for purposes of collecting. If you're offered employment under the same terms and circumstances and you just choose to refuse because you're doing better under the extra $600 a week that's available now, you should not continue to collect. The practical problems are in expediting that, and if it's contested in some fashion, how and where and when are you going to get a hearing on that issue? Because the Department of Labor is really overwhelmed at the moment for obvious reasons and isn't really prosecuting or dealing with anything on the enforcement side. And that's become a major source of frustration to several of my clients.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone. That was terrific information. So the next question, I think I probably know the answer to, but everyone should chime in too. Is there any information on when addiction support groups can meet in groups 10 or less in person? Does anyone have other information on addiction support services during this time? Is there anyone who wants? Yeah, go ahead.
I can't really answer the question because I think that comes directly from the governor's executive order in terms of groups that, you know, size of groups that can meet. I will say that this is one issue that's come. We've been doing an internal planning process here in Manchester to kind of anticipate what some of the community's needs are. And addiction services is one item that came up that's going to be, you know, an increased need, and it's going to be more difficult for those groups to get together. So we have discussed ways that our Human Services Department might be able to accommodate those groups meeting virtually. And I know that that's not, you know, that's not preferable, and hopefully that 10-person requirement will be lifted soon. But it is something that we're aware of, and our Senior Adult and Family Services Division is looking into.
That's great, Gary. Thank you. The next question says, if your industry gets the okay to reopen, but you cannot for whatever reason or choose not to, do you then lose access to the unemployment compensation? And so maybe for a sole proprietor, that would be an issue. Right? Do you know that? Or Shelley?
I do not know the length of time or the parameters for a sole proprietor to collect unemployment, even if they choose not to open. I don't know.
Abby, we've gotten this question a lot on restaurants. You know, we're still looking into the fine, but we would assume that you're not able to open fully. you can obviously prove that your business, is still, if it's a patio or if you can't do indoor, you still are being, the government is still asking you to be shut down in some capacity and for a business decision. So I know that's why we're trying to get some guidelines and some answers, because it gets asked a lot right now. Like, hey, I could add a patio, but I'm going to stay shuttered, and my staff or myself can still collect unemployment, correct? And we assume that the answer is yes, but we haven't gotten that clarity yet. But obviously, with the executive order still in place, that we're not business as usual, we would hope, that businesses can prove the fact that they can't open to actually run a viable business. So I'll try to get more answers from us.
Yeah, that would be great, because the questionnaire is specifically massage therapists. Now, they're not allowed to open as of yet, but when they do, so let's say they're allowed, June 20th, which is the potential date for phase 2, if they're allowed to, but they themselves are still not comfortable because of the proximity between client and practitioner, and they were getting that unemployment for a sole proprietorship. Would that then go away if they choose not to reopen? Anyway, if anyone gets any additional information on that, I'm sure April would be happy to send that along.
This is Sandy. I think that one of the things we all need to remember, and Mike mentioned it earlier, is that we're finding out more details each and every day. Mm-hmm. So what we say today may in fact not be the way it is tomorrow. So we all need to stay alert and stay in tune. And I think the chamber is a great way to make sure you do stay in connection with what's really happening.
Exactly. Thank you, Sandy. That's a great point. So PPP, back to that, information tells us that an employer can use 75% of this money to cover payroll. However, the restaurant business payroll is probably in the area of 35% of sales. Will the restaurant be able to apply this money to things other than payroll, rent, cost of goods sold, or utilities?
Great question, Abby. I think I get a PPP question every 5 minutes on my phone. Somehow I think I'm going to solve it. The way we look at it right now is the 75% is your payroll. Your 25% can go to mortgage interest, not obviously a mortgage payment, mortgage interest, rent, or utilities. Obviously, we know there's a lot of other costs that are out there. We talked about PPE as one of them, or reopening costs, or vendors, things like that. Unfortunately, right now in the forgiveness, you can't. Also, we haven't gotten the guidelines. We've been asking for guidelines for 4 weeks now from Treasurer and SBA on a national level. But the way that most banks are assuming is your 75-25 breakdown is on what you use for payroll. So give, I guess, a perfect example is if you got a $100,000 loan, you can't all of a sudden, especially in the restaurant industry, go, okay, $25,000 right out the door, I can pay my rent and I can pay my utilities. It's based on the forgiveness. So if you run your numbers and you're able to bring back, half of your staff and you're going to use $50,000 for payroll, then you get 25% additional. So 12.5 in a sense of that you 12,500 you could use for rent, utilities, but you couldn't use that full 25,000. And obviously, we're hoping for changes to these guidelines to help. I think the 75-25 you guys saw, about 30 senators signed a letter on a federal level trying to bring that down more and what the 25% could be used for. And then obviously there's the 8-week window. That's a huge challenge on all of this because your clock starts once your loan gets originated. And majority of your businesses, the people listening in, if you're fortunate to get your loan, your origination date probably has already started, and it's in that 8-week period that you're using right now. So whenever that time frame is when you're using for payroll, you can't prepay, you can't go back. So obviously that 35% might even be a little bit lower number to some of the restaurants on this call that I've talked to of what they actually think they can use for payroll because of the May 20th or I like to say June 3rd and what we would ask for an indoor, but I know you said June 20th from the governor, but we'll keep saying June 3rd out loud. Maybe it'll be a conversation, but yeah. So making sure people understand, I guess the guidance we're giving right now from a restaurant standpoint is make sure if you've gotten the money, you're using the dollars for those reasons. Don't just take out 25% and say, hey, I can pay my landlord, I can do those things. You have to understand the forgiveness portion is based on the paycheck projection of what you're bringing back of your payroll is why it was built that way. So you're going to have to play those and make sure you tell your landlord to make sure they understand that. And then you should be forgiven no matter whether anything changes or not, that you're doing it the right way and you're keeping all those things tabs and know that. But that is very confusing, and a lot of people are concerned, or landlords are like, hey, you got that money, you owe us rent. Like, well, I don't want you guys to be holding the bag 8 weeks from now saying, oh, well, I used it. And they go, well, you only got forgiven on this portion of it, and now you have a extended loan, which is the frustrating piece, that we already have enough debt that we don't want to have you carry.
To amplify Scott's point some, we're certainly looking at the tea leaves to see what's going to happen further on down the road. And I would predict that in terms of enforcement actions or investigations 6 months or a year from now, they're going to be looking closely at the good faith certificate in many instances as to whether this loan was really necessary. But more to the point for most chamber members here locally is, how was the proceeds of the loan actually used and applied? And we're encouraging our clients to be very cautious and not look for creative ways to constitute something as payroll or as something that is a qualifying use of the funds under the program.
Right. So this is Shelley. To echo both Mike and Scott, it is very confusing, the forgiveness part, and we don't have all of the calculations. But what the SBDC is doing is creating a calculation, a forgiveness calculation scenario. So we have a proprietary bottom line that we can do projections with, that we use with clients when they're looking for funding or starting a business, so forth and so on. We have taken a portion of that and we have created a forgiveness calculator. While it is not complete yet, because we don't have all the details from the SBA, that is going to be an easier way for our clients to understand. We can help plug in the numbers, and then it will populate for them the amount that is going to be forgiven. They can see that. And as well, I tell them, you're going to have to put some aside, because if you think all of this is going to be forgiven, it's not the case. Unless, for some reason, every penny is used for payroll. And even at that, if they got the $10,000 advance, that comes into play. There are just things that are collapsing together that were not understood at the beginning. As Sandy was saying, things change on a dime. The other piece that I want to mention is that I have suggested to my clients that they take out a separate bank account for the PPP. This way, every single transaction is accounted for. And that way, there's no question having to pick through their current operational fund as to what the money went for. If future down the road, 6 months, 8 months, they need to prove something, or they're asking, the application is asking for, evidence, they have it. So moving forward, those who haven't received their PPP yet, I highly recommend to keep it separate. Open up another business savings account or payroll account. Just make it payroll. But also,
that's been item 1. Don't commingle the money. Right. Create a account. There are plenty of our clients that are getting loans from various sources, and they're dumping it all into their operating accounts. My suggestion is that's a recipe for disaster.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. We have a number of questions in the queue here, so I want to make sure we get to as many as we can. So next is with the enhanced unemployment payouts, it's been very difficult to hire replacements. What can the business do? Are there any sort of resources to find people who may be looking for a job now?
I can try to answer that from an industry standpoint. We're getting ready to launch, hopefully later today or this weekend, a specific job board for our industry, because obviously and all of our members, they'll be able to, it's kind of off of very similar to an Indeed or other ways like that, but it'll be free to post for our members. We've already gotten a lot of our members starting to send us, because again, it is a challenge of trying to rehire, trying to find people that come back to work, but back to that PPP piece, which a lot of questions we get is, well, if they don't come back, but I can bring somebody else back, is that okay? Which it is. It's not, you have to bring Scott Dolch back, you have to bring back someone. So we're going to launch that job board this weekend, and make sure that it's just another avenue for people, our employers to have another way to post jobs, and hopefully people to go on, and we'll try to promote it as much as we can through social, and happy to share that link with the chamber here in Manchester too, for our industry.
Terrific, Scott. Thank you. Next question. Just recently, an employee was laid off and then called back when the employer received their PPP money. He paid the employee retroactively to the date of the layoff. In the meantime, the employee not only received state unemployment funds, but also the additional $600 federal funds for 1 week. Both employer and employee agree this became a double dipping situation. How does the employee pay back the $600 funds from the federal government, or the state unemployment for that matter? I did see something on the news the other day where there was, unfortunately, a number of, it wasn't PPE, but the stimulus money that went out to individuals, the $1,200 from the federal government. There was a number of deceased people who received a check, and there was definitely a method online that you could find to return, where to return the check if you hadn't cashed it as of yet, if a family member hadn't cashed the deceased family member's check, or if it was direct deposited or the check had been cashed, how there is a process to return those funds. And I would assume that it would be the same in this case. But does anyone have any insight into that?
This is Sandy. It's my understanding that the state will be issuing some guidance on that, but they have not yet. And I also believe it is actually the states that are distributing the federal money, but I'm not positive on that. So I would ask whoever this is to advise the employee to set aside the money, and as soon as that information is available, the chamber will have it and distribute it to members.
I just did a quick online search of the Department of Labor here in Connecticut, and I'm not finding anything that suggests that there's a way to deal with this and return it. But I agree with the advice about, again, segregating the money. And I suspect there'll be clarification coming further on down the road, because again, this receipt is taxable on both sides. And if you end up giving it back and getting a tax bill, that's not going to work out very well either. So there needs to be clarity as to how this is going to work going forward.
Thank you. I'm going to take the moderator's prerogative, and I'm going to add a question in of my own. If a business follows all of the protocols for reopening, as far as personal protective equipment, and an employee still contracts COVID out of this, I think there's concern on the parts of many businesses that they would be liable for, potential, lawsuits against them. I heard the governor the other day talk about, he felt that the reason that DECD was putting out such prescriptive elements that every business has to meet for sanitation and requirements for not only employees but for their customers. He felt that if they followed all of that, there should not be liability on their part. And I know that a lot of the higher education institutions have also been talking about if students come back and they follow all the plans that they put in place and filed with the state for reopening, they should not be liable. Does a law need to be passed to make that certain, or can that be part of an executive order, or how does that work to protect the employer from lawsuits of this nature?
If I may, I'll try to answer that one as best I can. I know that in the last round of funding under the CARES Act, there was ample discussion and debate about whether there should be an immunity provision for employers that abide by the appropriate guidelines and standards, and it didn't end up becoming part of the legislation, but that's not to suggest that that's not going to happen at some point in the future. What I will say as a litigator is, while the concern is very real amongst many of my clients about one misstep leading to a spate of lawsuits, I would be very, very surprised if plaintiffs in the foreseeable future are going to be able to establish their case with regard to the element of causation with any real specificity, and that any of these cases are going to have a chance of surviving some initial dispositive motions that could potentially get rid of the case. Because understand that a lawsuit involves liability, meaning that somebody breached a duty or engaged in conduct that exposes them to a claim. Causation, which means that act then caused the plaintiff's damages. I think causation is going to be next to impossible to prove with regard to how this virus progresses and is transmitted. I think the plaintiff is going to have a next to impossible time, even potentially with the assistance of some expert testimony, to show that the employer's failure is what resulted in me getting this virus.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
That's not to suggest the plaintiffs might not try. I think people who do what I do are ramping up to prepare for those types of cases. But if I was a plaintiff's lawyer, I'm not sure I'd want to be the first one to go along on one of those.
Next question is probably for Scott. When do we think the governor will allow bars to open?
Great question. Obviously, the May 20th is not happening. And then also on the June 20th piece, even in our suggestion of, I'll go back to June 3rd in our letter. So I like keep saying it out loud, as Tim knows, of trying to open inside. Bars were not a part of that initial conversation. However, there are other states out there that have relaxed their bar social distancing, and we're trying to look at that. Obviously, Georgia, Texas, I believe Ohio is looking at that. Obviously, Ohio is opening today outdoor, and then 6 days later is going to open indoor, but it will not have bars yet. But I mean, you guys have to understand, and the people that do have bars, the challenges that a bar can have, and making sure how can you follow, what are the guidelines that are different? How do you keep people maybe in their pack of 2 or 3 sitting at a bar? Also the space between the bartender and you and service, all of that plays into it. But let's not forget too, as I continue to just talk about when we started shutting down across the country, it was St. Patrick's Day weekend. So everyone viewed restaurants as this, oh my gosh, everyone. So we are also trying to go back on the side of a restaurant on May 20th for outdoor or even in an indoor capacity is going to be very controlled. It's going to look a lot different. And even to the bar side, as I've had many conversations with a lot of the bars in New Haven, I even know a lot of the bars in Manchester, they've asked this question, and we're trying to put together and learn from our states around us. But I would say initially, obviously not right away, but we're trying to figure out guidelines that can work for you so you can add that space. Even Massachusetts has talked a little bit behind the scenes about, how you can block off and still keep 6 foot spacing, 6 foot distancing, and have bar seats still be a part of those guidelines. But, we're going to kind of learn from around us, I think, with the other states and try to put that in our conversations with the advisory group and obviously the governor specifically of what that would look like. But I don't have any dates specific right now. And I think it kind of leads into the whole conversation of the kind of the new reality of what a restaurant and bar is going to look like in the short term. So hope that answers that question, I guess, a little bit right now.
Abby, can I just add one thing? Just in general, my experience so far in observing and participating in some of these conversations about reopen, first of all, and then in phases, there are sort of two dynamics that are taking place. One is that there's a healthy debate between economic development and public health as to what goes in first and when and all that. I know that Commissioner Lehman in particular has been pushing hard for some of these things, and then he's, has this on the other side, there's a public health, component, and somehow they have to kind of meet in the middle to come up with the guidelines for phasing open, which leads to the other point, which is data is really going to drive from how fast we open and how fast we move from phase 1 to phase 2 to reopen. So to the question of when will bars be open, I'm not quite sure we know what's going to be open until we continue to see the data and how we behave in phase 1 and how the results look in phase 1 may dictate how fast we move through the next 2 phases.
Can David, can you please mute your phone? Getting a lot of feedback. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Do you have additional or are you done? Sorry for that.
That was good.
Great, thank you. In order to reopen, what are the guidelines, requirements for employers when it comes to the cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting of office environments? And will professional sanitizing services be required? Ron, this is probably for you.
Well, the state had issued a reopen plan, and they have a self-certifying guide that you can get on Reopen Connecticut, and it gives you guidelines on how to set up, how to risk assess your place of work, and how to space your people and stuff like that. In terms of hiring a professional company, I recommend it because it's important to do the right things, but it's important to do the right things right. There's cleaning, and then there's professional cleaning, and for peace of mind, you want someone who's familiar with the OSHA guidelines and the CDC best practices. And that way you have peace of mind, and as I mentioned earlier, it's great to be certified. It would suck to lose your certification because you're not following best practices, and that can be taught. Professional cleaning company could assist you in doing that, and give you a plan to run with.
I'd like to add to that and kind of really support Robin in what he's saying. There are several elements to all, and I want to kind of back up to one of them is really for a business to be able to assess what it is they need to do, and really look at it from a financial standpoint, and then just because they can open, how they need to open, and then really looking at should they reopen. And all those components take into the finances, take into the emotions, and then what really needs to be done. To what, Rob was saying, it's important to do what's right, but it's also in this particular, and any time, is to do the right things properly and right. Now, the self-certification piece, and I'm going to just kind of say these things, but I'm going to come back to it. It is voluntary. And I know that the guidelines are not concrete, but they're out there. I guess the state reopening guide book is coming out soon. as well, you know, the chamber, all the fine little details. But part of that, right, it might be voluntary, but we look at the bigger picture of all this is really consumer confidence. And the setup of all this, right, is, are they doing the right things? Are they taking my safety, the employers and the employees' safety, like, seriously? And from a commercial cleaning company, I know I can't disinfect properly. So I want to know the store that I'm walking into or a restaurant that I'm going to has met all those guidelines as a consumer. Because just because you can open and to be the first open doesn't mean that everybody's going to come flooding to you. Everybody has a particular level of confidence that they have to have in order to emerge out of their house more than grocery shop these days. So, you know, to really reinforce, you need to certify, you need to self-certify, you need to follow those guidelines. And to have a professional help you do that is almost right now, even for my clients, imperative. There's so many other details that they are dealing with, that to take this element out and know that it's being done right and they don't have to worry about that piece from a standpoint of doing it is one piece that will help them sleep better at night. Now I'm going to go back to the financial piece, knowing how this is going to impact them from a financing standpoint. And this is where I will say the SBDC, we are taking a really big focus. We want to help small businesses that do have questions. And they're like, I know I can open. I've been told I can open, but I don't feel comfortable opening. I don't know if I financially can afford to open, but okay, what does that look like? We can help them navigate through that and find that time frame or that comfort level and what they need to do to provide, one, the comfort level for them and consumer confidence. And going back to signage, that's going to be huge. I'm not going to peek my head in and say, hey, have you guys done this right? It's going to need to be out in the open. It's going to need to be on their doors, on their website. It's a whole different.
Hold on 1 second. David, C, can you? Thank you.
So, you know, really, our professional services are really going to come into key play here. And thank you for being on. And really, as industries, really businesses, you need to really hone in on your industry associations. They are going to give you the best information in regards to these guidelines and who in the industry can really help and, you know, follow practices. So
Bob and April, if I can just interject here, I have to exit the conference at this point to deal with something of an urgent matter, but I did want to let April know that I'll make my email address available for dissemination to all the attendees today if there are questions that I can answer today after the conference is over. So my apologies, but I do have to exit at this point.
Thank you, Mike.
Best of luck to everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Abby, from a restaurant standpoint, because I think Ron makes a great point, because there's a lot of questions that, you know, cost is obviously one thing, but I would say, you know, the biggest messaging point we are leading as an association, even prior to these guidelines, like we launched 2 weeks ago, what we're calling the Connecticut Restaurant Promise. It's a promise that our restaurants are making to their employers and to their customers. And there's best practices in there, to Ron's point about cleaning and sanitation commercially done prior to or any throughout the process. But I think, you know, Shelley made a great point about signage and promoting this. I mean, it's interesting. Like yesterday, I think it was, might've been Luna Pizza was on the cover, getting commercially, professionally cleaned their patio. And at like your face, initially you're like, that doesn't make me feel great. But at the same time, you're like, okay, they're going above and beyond. And I think those are the things as a retail or a restaurant or a business, we are in a whole new time right now, and making it's not about when you can open from the governor. It's not about, oh, this state can open or not. It's about the consumer, you know, feeling that they're safe to go and do those things. And it's going to take time, but also the more you can do, to make them feel comfortable. And I talked about the mask before, but signage at your window, and with our promise, you know, we have infographics and posters that are going to get put up. And another big part of the promise is it's not just the employer's promise. There's a promise we're asking of the customers that if you are, over a certain age, or you have any symptoms, like you're not going to come into our business, or you're going to use, contactless delivery, like, giving them other options. But it needs to be everyone in this together. But the signage piece and doing it the right way, to Ron, to be able to say, hey, I had Beacon Cleaning come through, as opposed to I tried to do it myself, or using the same analogy as I had fluorescent X's for you to stand on, as opposed to like small floor mats that aren't that cost effective, with our branding on it, to make them feel, okay, we're doing this the right way. And we're not just, like putting up tape or measuring tape or blocking people off. It's got to be a welcoming. I mean, we're a service industry. It's customer, I know this service is going to look a lot different, but when people can feel very comfortable, like, wow, you guys have gone above and beyond, and you promote that on social, or you tell those people that you're doing those things. We've already seen that in the takeout and curbside of the restaurants that have pivoted. And, I make an analogy of Millwrights up here in Simsbury, where I am. They installed a Ring doorbell on a stick for you to get takeout and curbside. So you pull up and you hit, like, to make it as easy but as safe as possible. You're texting to your parking spot. So the sanitation and safety, I feel in our industry, we are leaders in that. I mean, we have Serve Safe behind us. As everyone knows, it's a restaurant on here. They're actually adding new programs right now. We just launched yesterday a reopening Serve Safe video, a 2-hour video that we're imploring all of our restaurants and employees to watch. It's free, but it's important that I think our businesses take this to heart, to Shelley's point, that, hey, I know I could open, but I want to do it the best way. And I want to educate my customers that I'm going above and beyond, and educate my employees that I'm here to protect you and service you. So I appreciate those comments and what Ron's doing as well, and try to help from an association standpoint.
Abby, this is Sandy. I have one more thing to add. I haven't heard yet on this call any mention of the required self-certification for a business planning to reopen on May 20th. DECD and David Lehman yesterday it uploaded the mandatory self-certification process to business.ct.gov/recovery. It takes just a couple of minutes, and it's a bunch of questions. I have the PPE. I understand the sanitation. I agree for the sanitation. And then after that, you can download safety signage and a badge that says, I've completed this self-certification. It can go on your menus. It can go on your website. So I think that will be another method to help businesses communicate with the public that, yes, I have attested to this, and yes, we're going to be doing everything we can to keep you safe.
That's great, Sandy. Thank you. The next question is for Gary. Gary, what has the town of Manchester been doing to work with particularly restaurants around Main Street, stores around Main Street, dealing with ordinance for patio seating requirements so businesses can offer more outdoor dining or commerce?
Yes, thanks for the question. As I mentioned at the outset, over the last week and a half, really, or 2 weeks now, I guess, we've really been scrambling to try to get ahead of the executive order that was published this week by the governor, because he had given some clues about it, a couple of weeks ago. But obviously we have many restaurants here in Manchester. It's a big part of our economy here. We understand that, restaurants have really been hit hard here. And we've really made an attempt here to be as flexible and accommodating as we possibly can. We sent some guidance to all restaurants in Manchester at the end of last week, outlining what I'm going to say here next. And really that process is kind of a two-pronged approach. First, on Monday, the Planning and Zoning Commission is having a public hearing to do exactly what the governor said we could do, which is suspend or waive certain zoning regulations that come in conflict conflict with additional outdoor dining. So typically, you know, a restaurant would have to come at least to staff for administrative approval, or in some cases go to the commission and meet the regulations that are in play here. It's a, you know, months-long process at times, you know, could be a month or more. Here, we're trying to be as, again, flexible and creative as possible to allow expansion of existing outdoor spaces or new spaces on places like parking lots or grassy areas or public right-of-way. And we need the Planning and Zoning Commission to act to allow us to do that. In concert, and I should say, if anybody wants to speak at that public hearing, the hearing notice is up on our website, or I could provide you the link. Obviously, public comment is welcome, and I'm sure there are restaurants that would want to speak to that. At the same time, we've been developing an internal process for processing these applications, and it's a one-stop application. It's about a page and a half. It shouldn't take too long to fill out. All we need is a drawn plan. That doesn't need to be an engineered plan, obviously. It just needs to be showing where your outdoor dining is, how it meets the state's social distancing and the other requirements that are out there. And then that goes through our internal process in a matter of days. It goes to the health department, fire, building, all the necessary departments sign off on it. And that's, you know, we've made it, again, as efficient as we possibly can to try to accommodate businesses. In terms of downtown, we recognize that there's some additional opportunities downtown. Outdoor dining is something that we've encouraged downtown in recent years anyways. So we wanted to see that type of activity. And there are opportunities along building frontage on the public sidewalk or a portion of the public sidewalk. Over the last couple of years, we've had pop-ups in on-street parking spaces, and we've communicated to downtown businesses that could be an opportunity here as well. There's bump outs, you know, along the sidewalk. So just physically, there are some accommodations that we could make for businesses that wouldn't necessarily always jive with the traditional regulations, but in this case, because of the executive order, we can entertain those. So I'd encourage all restaurants to, you know, if you're considering it, reach out to us. The link is up on the website, and so far I think we've had about 10 applications this week. I'd expect, you know, many more over the next few days.
Terrific. Sandy, do you want to respond for Bolton as well, please?
In Bolton, our planning and zoning professionals have reached out to every restaurant in town to explain to them the process. But anyone else who's just interested, our planning and zoning commission took action to authorize our zoning enforcement officer, who is also our fire marshal, to issue the required permits, and we're working very closely with our health district so that the approval process will be seamless and quick. We're hoping it can be done in a week or less. So get those applications in. They can be, as Gary said, hand-drawn diagrams, as long as we can tell that the proper social distancing is there. We want you to be successful, and everything can be done totally online, and all fees are waived.
Great. Thanks, Sandy. Tim, this next question is for you. Buckland Hills Mall is a huge component for this area. Malls are allowed to open on May 20th, but obviously their own unique challenges. Could you talk to us a little bit about what people can expect? First of all, if the mall is going to open on the May 20th timeframe, and what businesses within a mall have to care for?
Sure, I'm happy to. The mall is a member of ours, and as you mentioned, a big part of the Manchester community. And as my understanding is, they will be open on that day. And I think one of the first things you may notice when the mall reopens is not every store within the mall will reopen on May 20th. So some of the national retailers may just, back to an earlier point about employees, it may take them a little while to get reorganize with their staffs and getting employees back on board in the manner that in time that they'd like. So you can expect that the mall will be open, but not. I wouldn't be surprised if not every store within the mall was open. In addition, I think you can expect certain things within the mall to look different than they were. This goes back to Scott was referencing how bars and restaurants were looking like prior to shutdown. Well, malls are similar in that regard. So they will have made some changes in terms of flow of traffic. They'll try to encourage, sort of like one-way streets, if you will, on within the mall, so that directionally that they can keep the flow moving, so there isn't people aren't crossing each other as much as they can. You may see specific entrances and exits. You will probably see markings on the floor for social distancing. And you may see some reduced hours as well in the mall. I think you'll see many of the team at the mall doing their best to eliminate any kind of congregation. So if it looks as if there's multiple people congregating in certain areas, they're going to try to do their best to kind of encourage people to disperse. The food courts inside the malls will be closed. The restaurants within the malls will be allowed to do takeout. Scott probably better position to answer this, but they won't be able to, the seating with the sit-down requirements for those restaurants inside the mall will not be allowed to take place. The overall soft seating, if you will, inside a mall will probably too be reduced dramatically as well. So the whole idea is that the inside stores of the mall need to reopen to sort of get back going again. So there's the balance between the economic activity that needs to take place versus the potential for the spreading of the virus through the community spread that could take place inside of a mall. So the balance is trying to adjust the inside of the mall so that it accommodates shopping, but at the same time limits the spread. So some of that you may notice that when you go inside the mall. And the other thing you may notice is the expectation, which could be in general for lots of retail, that demand may be slow when we get started. I think this is to a point that Michelle was making earlier, is a lot of economic activity around retail is going to depend on consumer confidence. And so our expectation is we're not going to see customers flying back to stores or malls immediately upon opening on May 20th. It's going to be a gradual thing. That may in fact be a good thing overall for all of us, is that we gradually get back to a system or a way of life that we're all comfortable with. And so you may see that reflective in malls as well. There may not be an overwhelming number of people inside the mall as well. But again, we want it to be open because we do want to see some economic activity going again. But I think the malls have made, in Manchester in particular, I know their companies have really detailed plans about how they want the mall to look when it reopens. So some of those physical changes you will see when you walk into the mall. In addition to that, the anchor stores in the mall will also look differently as well, because they're going to have to comply with the safe store guidelines that are in place. So those stores are going to look differently as well, as most stores will. So it'll be a little different, but I think they're ready to be opened. I know the mall itself is ready. Virginia, who's the mall manager there, has done a terrific job getting her staff, and they're still probably working on getting reopened. But I think that when that day begins next week, the mall will be ready to go.
Terrific. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. One more question is, can you pay your cell phone bill as a utility through PPP money? And technically, cell phones are not a regulated utility, but I think every cell phone carrier has signed on to the Keep America Connected pledge, and each have their own set of criteria that you can reach out to them and either get data caps removed or non-payment through June 30th of your bills, but then you do have to catch up, no late payment fees. But I will tell everyone who's struggling to pay their bills, you have to reach out to the company. You have to let them know what your circumstances are. It is definitely not automatic. And so I encourage everyone, if you're having some trouble paying your bills, just reach out to whomever your carrier is, and they can accommodate you. If you wait past a certain date, you're going to have more difficulty than if you do it now. So I just encourage everyone to do that.
Abby, the CARES Act actually defines utilities as electric, gas, water, telephone, or internet. It specifically does not say cell phone. So I would caution anyone who has a cell phone that they use for both business and personal, that it might not, that cell phone service might not qualify.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And I think that's why the carriers put in the programs that they did to try and give relief to their customers. I appreciate that, Sandy. Thank you. At the moment, I don't have any additional questions in the queue. Is there any point that anyone on the panel wanted to make that wasn't asked as of yet?
I just wanted to make it. Go ahead,
sorry.
Tim.
I was going to say, Abby, I just wanted to say, the guidelines for reopening retail are pretty much in place. We just did get word this morning from Commissioner Lehman that fitting rooms at retail stores will be allowed to be opened. He was very accommodating and working with us on that. But if anybody has any other questions about reopening, if they have a retail store and they want to reopen, our association is hosting a webinar today with Commissioner Lehman at 1 o'clock. If you're interested in participating, registration is free if you want to listen in as well. So if you want to email me, I'll send you the registration link, or if you want to email April, and April can send it along to me. I'd be happy to have anybody else, listen in, and if they have any questions about reopening a retail store, we're going to try to get as many of those answered today.
I was just going to make a quick comment, follow up from Sandy and Gary's. I just want to thank you both for, as towns, especially for our restaurants, being so receptive and helpful, and the restaurants listening in. I think I've continued to drive this message home with all of our restaurants around the state. I know everyone's like, well, I don't have a patio, what, I just need to wait till indoor. I need to get to 100%. That is, I can tell you honestly, that's going to take some time, and you need to start to think about using these summer months in the fall to look to a patio. If you don't, maybe you don't need it on May 20th, but being able to work with Gary and work with Sandy and their teams of your towns of that, if you're looking at revenue streams, obviously takeout and curbside, you're going to need to try to find a way to increase that. But the same needs to be said for outdoor, because you can expand your outdoor and keep those social distancing guidelines. You're stuck by the four walls you have inside. So I would urge you guys to continue to talk with both Gary and Sandy here in the town to maybe make a decision down the road. It could even be a June or middle of June, but take them up on that. And I really appreciate all the work you guys are doing to help talking about streets and patios. I mean, it's going to be extremely helpful for these restaurants to try to find a way to open and make people come to their businesses right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's great, Scott. Thank you. Anyone else at the moment? I would just say that things are literally changing on a daily basis, and as Tim alluded to, with the opening of May 20th, I think what the governor and the Reopen Connecticut group is going to be looking at is what are the outcomes of that. In 2 weeks' time, in 3 weeks' time, what is the result of this partial opening? Do we have a spike in cases? You know, did some things work better than other things? So although there are 4 phases to the reopening, it really is one step at a time, and then taking in that data and having it be analyzed in a you know, thorough and professional manner. And the decisions made aren't being made willy-nilly. They're really have a great group compiled here to make sure that the interests are all taken into account and balanced throughout between you know, economic recovery and public health. So every day things are changing. So if you don't like something today, you know, wait, and chances are it'll change in the weeks to come. So April, that's all we have in the queue at the moment.
Yep. If I could, I'd like to just remind everybody that for those maybe who came in late or had to leave early, that the guide that the recovery guide we're talking about, the information you received today, along with other information that we've put together, will be sent out to all of you who registered for the event. If some of you came into the event without registering, we don't know. So we're not able to send that to you. So if you could email us to let us know that you were here today, so that we can include you on that when we send that guide out next week. We'll also be sending a survey along too about just a few questions about your business, where you are in the process, and if you have any needs. I also want to plug social media and the Buy Local raffle that we have going on right now. If any of you have Facebook pages, or we'd love for you to check ours out at manchester.c.ct. This raffle is a Go Explore Manchester raffle, and it, like I said, it encourages people to buy local, buy through local chamber members, and the winner will be drawn on June 17th at our annual meeting. The winner will receive a $100 restaurant gift card and a $50 gas card. All the details are there on our Facebook page. I won't bore you with the rest, but it's a fun way to support our members. So I urge you to check it out. And Bob, would you like to say a few?
Sure. So I want to thank everyone for attending this morning. The questions were great. Our panelists were excellent with your information. When all of this started, it was different to me. I have learned that we can have 60, 70 people on a phone call and it works, and I can be in a shirt and tie and still wear my sweatpants. So, but I do again appreciate all of you here. I hope someday that we're all together again, and I think we will be. Maybe something different than a little screen on my video, and I look forward to that day. So, but thank you all again for coming, and the Chamber is here for you during this crisis, and we'll be here going forward. Thanks again.
Thank you, panelists.
Thank you for inviting me, April. I appreciate it. Abby, thank you as always.
Thank you,
Everyone.
Thank you.
our panelists, and Abby, thank you so much for sponsoring.
You bet.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.